which made me think about a conversation I had with someone yesterday about how they came into a conversation. It was actually a very uncomfortable conversation.
You gotta have those
And
uncomfortable.
it was very, very uncomfortable.
You gotta do
Okay.
uncomfortable work.
Do uncomfortable work. Plug right there. And we find like we just the vibe was off, right? Like the vibe is there's this weird energy. And we finally get to the end of it, and she's like, and I promise this point is related. She's like, yeah, you know what? I came into this conversation feeling defeated, feeling like I wasn't doing things the way that you thought I should be doing them. I felt really heavy coming into this and felt bad. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. And I said, in my experience, when I come into a conversation with a certain lens on, right? Whether it's a negative one or like, oh, this person's out to get me lens, like everything they say, I am interpreting it through that lens. But if I come into a conversation feeling good and confident and excited, whatever, like in a more positive emotional state, everything they said, I would have heard it and felt it and interpreted it differently. And I think that has so much of a role in how, when we listen, right? Even when you have, because people are like, oh, text has no tonality. You don't know what people are actually saying, which is true. Email has no tone. I mean, it does have tone, but like there's so much of that you're interpreting for yourself. But even in person, like this was an in-person, face-to-face conversation. And tone was very clear. Emotion was very clear. Body language was very clear. Yet the things I was saying were getting interpreted completely differently than how I meant them. And the place we got to was because of the state, the glasses, like the filter that she had on that day.
And that, I mean, what you said exactly is the exact thing that Michael was talking about when he says, like, like 95% of the time, what you think is not going to happen, right? Like when you have that uncomfortable, when you do have that uncomfortable talk, or when you confront that person, 95% of the time, it's just in your head you were thinking the worst case scenario, right? So I just feel like so many people do that. Like they, I forgot which YouTube video I saw this in, but it was showing Brie Larson, how like why everyone hates Brie Larson, and it was showing a video of, how like they have celebrities come on, and they'll have like, is Brie Larson, and then like Google suggests shows you the rest or whatever, so they'll do that. What she was doing was like every single suggestion that like does Brie Larson go to the gym? Is Brie Larson, whatever. Well, every suggestion that came up, she was interpreting negatively. Like she was like, what does that mean? Like that I need to lose weight? Like
Right.
You know what I mean? And it just made her like so unlikable. Like
Yeah.
But like it's because she was interpreting everything through that lens. Do you know what I mean?
Through that lens. Yes.
Even though when I saw
right.
it, when I saw the suggestions, like it just seemed like it's fans curious about you.
Yeah.
But she interpreted it as all like negative comments.
Yes. And depending on what kind of energy you're carrying around that day, what set of glasses you have on, I feel like is a big factor in how you're interpreting things. Like, and just like in that conversation, we got into this place where there were a lot of interactions that had happened even prior to that conversation that just spiraled, where it was like one thing was interpreted one way, which then built a story in her head, which then the next time something was said, built a story in her head. Then the next time is a story in her head. And so I, on the other side, I'm like, whoa, all of that makes sense when you say it that way. Like why you thought that. Like all that makes sense.
Oh, so it was kind of a. It's not just
but
like
that
the
is
way she heard it, but the way you said it too.
yeah. I was
Maybe.
like, oh, I can. But how you can flip it and make whatever story you want
But
in your head.
but I'm sure if
Even with
she heard your side, she'll be like, "Oh, that totally makes sense too."
so then I was like, okay, let's go back. Let's go back to all these instances because I totally see how you could feel that way and why it would come off that way and how you could build this story in your head. And now this energy that you're bringing all makes sense. But let me tell you what I was thinking. I thought I was eliciting like a positive message. And I thought that I was actually relieving some burden without realizing what I was doing was perpetuating this negative cycle, which was not the intention at all. So I think that we, like, as much as we can, as uncomfortable as it is, man, that conversation was probably one of the most uncomfortable I've had in the last 3 years. I mean, it was like a very uncomfortable conversation. But the fact that, like, how powerful it is to get curious and to just keep asking, like, get
You know what I
curious.
think?
Like, what?
I think you need to have some more uncomfortable conversations. If that was the most
Why?
uncomfortable conversation you had in 3 years.
No, I mean, it was really, I mean, it was very emotional. It was heated. There was,
But you don't have
mean,
conversations
it
like that
wasn't-
with Michael. Or like, you know.
no,
like-
okay, I don't count the ones with him because
Okay.
we will have uncomfortable, we're so practiced in it, right? That it doesn't become,
Yeah, actually, yeah.
it doesn't become a thing.
Just because it's easy for you, it might be harder with somebody else. Like,
Yeah.
for you, it might be easy to do it with Michael because you know that, he's like that too. Yeah.
Right. And that's my husband. I've been with him for almost 8 years. Like there you get into a rhythm, like there becomes a level of intimacy in that relationship that you just kind of know if you're doing the work to communicate and know each other, I think.
But I just feel like that could be everywhere though. Like I think the problem is that, right? The fact that you don't feel maybe not as comfortable as Michael, but close to that comfort level with other people. I just think there's a huge problem there in a society like that because then what happens is we start building walls around us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of like having conversation, which is gonna 99% of the time resolve everything, we don't. And we just build walls around each other.
Dude, I 100% wanted to evacuate that conversation. I mean, there became a point. There's like I feel like those conversations are like a bell curve. There's this curve to them. They kind of go up to energy, and there's this like peak moment. And in that peak moment of that conversation, I was like, I'm out. I even said, I was like, you know what? This is so uncomfortable. I'm 99% sure I'm about to make some statements that I'm going to regret. So I need to walk away. But the ability to then it's like pushing through a toddler tantrum, man. You just got to like push through that emotional discomfort because these uncomfortable conversations, in my experience, are all because of I want to avoid this visceral reaction. I want to avoid that feel. Like the discomfort isn't the actual saying the words. The discomfort for me is how I feel, like that pit, like that stomach tension, like my body's all tingly because I'm like emotional. Yeah, or like they're saying something and it's like sparking like this visceral feeling, right? This visceral reaction inside. And I just, in my experience, like just want to avoid that and not pop off and say things that I regret. But my ability yesterday to just like sit in that for a second with the person and just sit in that discomfort and then get curious to better understand like why is this happening and to start to ask questions that aren't attacks, right? But like are genuine, like how did we get here?
So there was a moment when because that climax was probably not the climax. It became the climax because you had that moment. Do you understand?
Yeah.
I mean, it would have kept going up, right? So
Yeah.
I think that climax, the moment that you're talking about, happens when you disappear your ego, and it can really happen just like that.
Yeah.
As soon as
Yes.
you're aware of it. Yeah.
Yes. Like I could tell, right? I even gave voice to it, right? I said, I am about to lose it. Like
yeah.
I'm very upset. I was like, I'm about to say something.
Yeah, you were like referring to your ego as a third person.
Yes. Yes. I'm like, I want you to know that I need to pause this conversation.
Yeah.
Now, in that moment, I wanted to walk away and be like, dude, we'll talk about this later. Let's let it be awkward. I don't care. Right. But instead, like having that awareness, seeing it, it's almost like the third eye concept. I get like I could see what was happening and to be like, dude, okay. Wait, let me just ask a couple of questions. Like, I think I was just like, how did we get here? Like, how did we get here? Like,
I mean, that was the real start of the conversation, probably, right? Because
it was.
You were probably just beating around the bush, getting emotional all the way up until that point.
Right.
And then that's when the real conversation starts happening, when you try to understand each other.
Right, because there was a lot of like logic taking place, and there was a lot of like trying to be just misinterpretation of facts. And the reason the misinterpretation of facts was happening is because there was this emotional layer that was unsaid. And she even said, like, finally, when I got curious, I mean, that's just coming to mind for me, is like, just to get curious, and I was like, why is this happening? And she was just like, you know what? I think I came into this conversation with like a lot of negativity. Here's why. This is why I felt this way. And I think if I would have led with that, I mean, kudos to her too. It takes two to tango in these situations. She was able to say, I think that is why I'm feeling this way. We finally got to like what the emotional driver was, because all the facts are what they are. They're binary. The facts are the facts, but what starts to really distort things are these emotional layers that get tangled up in it. And I think the emotion is the part that, in everything that we've talked about today, that's what's so, I mean, that just blurs the lines. That's what makes us human.